Jaya Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapatam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vamshakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this is chapter 12, the perfect society for spiritual classes. So today we're speaking about the ashramas, and in particular, Vanaprastha ashram. And that begins from text 17. So it's 17 until the end of the chapter.
It's 31, I guess.
Which is, I think, the last verse.
Oh, yes.
And then we're reciting
on
24.
24, yes.
So how would you like us to read all of them first and then go back, or
yes,
stop in the middle and then continue?
We'll read until 31, like
everyone will take turns.
Yeah, and then we'll focus on 24. We'll recite it.
Okay, so let us begin.
Yes.
Sorry?
Yes.
Okay, I shall now describe the qualifications for a Vanaprastha, one who has retired from family life, by rigidly following the rules and regulations for the Vanaprastha. One can easily be elevated to the upper plenary system, known as Mahar Loka.
A person in Vanaprastha life should not eat grains grown by tilling of the field. He should also not eat grains that have grown without tilling of the field but are not fully ripe. Nor should a Vanaprastha eat grain cooked in fire, and he should eat fruits ripened by the sunshine.
A Vanaprastha should prepare cakes to be offered in sacrifice from fruits and grains grown naturally in the forest. When he obtains some new grains, he should give up his old stock of grains.
A Vanaprastha should prepare a thatched cottage or a clay shelter for game in a mountain, only to keep the sacred fire. But he should personally practice enduring snowfall, wind, fire, rain, and the shining of the sun.
The Vanaprastha should wear matted locks of hair on his head and let his body hair, nails, and mustache grow. He should not cleanse his body of dirt. He should keep a water pot, deerskin, and rope, wear the bark of a tree as a covering, and use garments colored like fire.
Being very thoughtful, a Vanaprastha should remain in the forest for 12 years, 8 years, 4 years, 2 years, or at least 1 year. He should behave in such a way that he will not be disturbed or followed by too much austerity.
When because of disease or old age one is unable to perform his prescribed duties for advancement in spiritual consciousness or study of the Vedas, he should practice fasting, not taking any food.
He should properly place the fire element in his own self, and in this way give up bodily affinity, by which one thinks the body to be one's self or one's own. One should gradually merge the material body into the five elements: earth, water, fire, air, and sky.
A sober, self-realized person who has full knowledge should merge the various parts of the body in their original sources. The holes in the body are caused by the sky. The process of breathing is caused by the air. The heat of the body is caused by fire and semen. Blood and mucus are caused by water. The hard substances like skin, muscle, and bone are caused by earth. In this way, all the constituents of the body are caused by various elements, and they should be merged again into those elements.
Thereafter, the object of speech, along with the sense of speech, the tongue should be bestowed upon the fire. Craftsmanship and the two hands should be given to the demigod Indra. The power of movement and the legs should be given to Lord Vishnu. Sensual pleasure along with the genital should be bestowed upon Prajapati. The rectum with the power of evacuation should be bestowed in its proper place onto the Mrityu. The oral instrument along with the sound and vibration should be given to the deities presiding over the direction. The instrument of touch along with the sense object of touch should be given to the Vayu. Form with the power of sight should be bestowed upon the sun. The tongue along with the demigod Varuna should be bestowed upon water, and the power of smell along with the two Ashwini Kumara demigods should be bestowed upon the earth.
The mind, along with all the material desires, should be merged into moon demigod. All the subject matters of intelligence, along with intelligence itself, should be placed in Lord Brahma. False ego, which is under the influence of material modes of nature, and which induces one to think, I am this body, and everything connected with this body is mine, should be merged along with the material activities in Rudra, the predominating deity of false ego. Material consciousness, along with the goal of thought, should be merged in the individual living being, and the demigods acting under the modes of material nature should be merged along with the perverted living being into the supreme being. The earth should be merged in water, and water in the brightness of sun. This brightness into the air, and the air into the sky into the false ego, and the false ego into the total material energy. The total material energy into the unmanifested ingredients, the pradhan features of material energy, and at last the ingredient feature of material manifestation into the super soul.
When all the material designations have thus merged into their respective material elements, the living beings, who are ultimately completely spiritual, being one in quality with the Supreme Being, should cease from material existence, as flames cease when the wood in which they are burning is consumed. When the material body is returned to its various material elements, only the spiritual being remains. This spiritual being is Brahman and is equal in quality with Parabrahm.
Thank you very much. So we'll read together text 24. Atman yagnin samaropya sanyasyaham mamatmatam karaneshu nyaset samyak sanghatam tu yatharhatah Atmane agnin samaropya Sanyasaham Mahatmanam Karaneshu Nyasat Samyak Sanghatam tu yatharata
Atmanyagnin
Samaropya
Sanyasyahim mamat matam
Sanyasyaham mamatmatam.
Karaneshu nyashit samyak.
Karnishu nyasait samyak.
Sangahatma tu yatharthaha.
Sanghatam tu yatharhata.
Atmani agnim samaropya.
Atmanye agnin samaropya. Sorry.
Sanyasyaham mamat
Matam.
matam
Sanyasaham mamatmatam. Karaneshu nyaset samyak.
Karaneshu nyashit samyak.
Sangatam tu yatha rataha.
Sanghatam tu yatharhata.
Atmane agnin samaropya.
Atmane agnin samaropya.
Sanyasyaham mama matam.
Sanyasyaham mamatmatam.
Karneshu natyasat samyak.
Karneshu nyaset samyak.
Sangatam tu yatharata.
Sangatam tu yatharhata.
Atmani agnam samaropya.
Atmane agnin samaropya.
Sanyasaham mamatmatam.
Sanyasaham mamatmatam. Karaneshu nyaset samyak.
Sanghatan tu yatharhata.
Sangatam tu yatharhata.
Now it's just starting to bounce around a little. And we do the word for word.
Yep.
Atmani,
Atmani,
in oneself.
in oneself.
Agni,
Agni,
the fire elements within the body.
the fire elements within the body.
Samaropya,
Samaropya,
properly placing.
properly placing.
Sanyasya,
Sanyasya,
giving up.
giving up.
Aham, false identity.
False identity.
Mama, false conception.
False conception.
Atmatam,
Atmatam,
of the body's being.
of the
body's being.
Oneself or one's own.
Oneself or one's own.
Karaneshu,
Karaneshu,
in the five elements.
in the five elements
That cause the material body.
that cause the material body.
Nyasit,
Nyaset,
one should merge.
one should merge.
Samyak,
Samyak,
completely.
completely.
Sanghatam,
Sanghatam,
combination.
combination.
Two, but. Yatha arhataha,
Yatha arhataha,
as it befits.
as it befits.
Translation. He should properly place the fire element in his own self, and in this way give up bodily affinity, by which one thinks the body to be oneself or one's own. One should gradually merge the material body in the five elements: earth, water, fire, air, and sky. Do we read this together also?
We can do whatever, like, if you want to read, or if you want someone to read, or we can do it together.
Yeah, you can read.
The body is an effect of a cause, namely the five material elements: earth, water, fire, air, and sky. In other words, one should know perfectly well that the material body is nothing but a combination of the five elements. This knowledge constitutes merging of the material body and the five material elements. Merging into Brahman in perfect knowledge means understanding perfectly that one is not the body but a spiritual soul.
Yeah.
So, this is a long series of verses. The theme is Vanaprastha ashrams. We're all familiar with the ashramas. I think we must have covered before this the two before it. Right? So we're familiar with brahmacharya. I think one of us is familiar, at least. Actually, we have two brahmacharis in the room. And technically, we should have a whole room full of brahmacharis here, if we understand the principle. And the principle is what we'll be talking about actually today. Understanding the principle behind the different ashrams or varnas. Because Srila Prabhupada emphasized very much this varnashram system, as His Holiness Bhakti Marg Swami mentioned in his class a few days ago. He said Srila Prabhupada talked about Varnashram basically just as much as he spoke about Krishna. Almost every purport, Srila Prabhupada is expounding on this system of Varnashram Dharma. And here in the Bhagavatam, there are innumerable passages educating us on the Varnashram system. And this 7th canto, especially, Narad Muni is expounding in great detail on the Varnashram system. So, really wanted us to understand and apply, implement this Varnashram system, but how is it possible in this age of Kali Yuga? I mean, Varnashram, doesn't it begins with the Brahmins, and it requires great qualified kings, Maharshis, like Yudhishthir Maharaj or Parikshit Maharaj. And where do we find such qualified people in this age? So it seems like a great task to establish Varnashram. Yet Srila Prabhupada desired it. So the most important thing for us to understand is the principles behind the system. We have two things. We have principles and we have details. There's a principle that we want to attain in any activity. And the details are the form in which we take to achieve that principle. Like, for example, I want to hold some water so that I can have it to drink. That's the principle. Now the form it takes is this cup. I could use another type of cup. That's a detail. But the principle is that I want to contain the water, right? I want to have a surface so that I can hold up the books and my laptop. The detail is this particular table. It could be another table. There's another table here I could use. So the principle is what we're trying to attain. The form may vary. So when it comes to Varnashram, also, we want to understand the principle. In Vanaprastha ashram, probably you could understand from the verses we were reading, the principle is tapasya, austerity. This is the meaning of Vanaprastha. In fact, Vanaprastha literally means to go to the forest, the van. And that means to live a life of voluntary hardships. In the previous ashram, the Grihastha ashram, we have a tendency to get very comfortable. And Srila Prabhupada often said that in the Grihastha ashram, it's a license for sense gratification. You get a license. So the Grihastha gets more facility, he gets more opportunities to enjoy his senses than all of the three other ashrams. In the Brahmachari ashram, the Vanaprastha ashram, and the Sannyas ashram, all three of these are ashrams of renunciation, right? Only one of the ashrams, the Grihastha ashram, is more comfortable. So, ideally, in the Vedic system, the Varnashram system, one goes through these 4 stages, beginning with brahmacharya, and that would happen from a young age, about 4 or 5 years old, that the young boys would go to Gurukul, and the girls would be trained at home also by the senior ladies in the home. They would both go through a training of simplicity. So the brahmacharis would be very comfortable functioning in an environment of austerity. They would sleep on the floor. They would be serving the spiritual master, doing various menial services. And that's what brahmacharya is about, is developing a service attitude and also becoming comfortable with a simple life. Now, after the brahmacharya ashram, one may, if he needs to, go into the grihastha ashram, if he has a need to get married. And after that, then retiring into vanaprastha, he would already have the prior experience from brahmacharya, so that he could easily adopt that simple lifestyle again. So one of the challenges in modern times with vanaprastha ashram And that was one of the, I guess, points you wanted me to cover, I was told, is applying this, in our life, right? One of the challenges is that now in ISKCON, many devotees are joining already in a grihasta situation without having the prior experience of brahmacharya. And this Bhakti Academy is nice in the sense that it's giving you all an opportunity to experience ashram life and to get some basic training in ashram, which you would normally get in the brahmacharya ashram. But many people don't have that opportunity, and they're joining ISKCON already married or already connected with some significant other, and without having the experience of brahmacharya. So they don't have experience of this simple life of austerity and discipline. So when we speak of vanaprastha, then it becomes very confusing. What does that mean? What does it look like? But for a brahmachari, one who has at least strictly observed the principles of brahmacharya previously in their youth, they know exactly what it looks like. And for them, it's easy to revert back to this. They understand that when they're getting into the grihasta ashram, this is for a particular purpose, for them to become detached and overcome some anarthas, some attachments or material desires that they have, which are obstructing their progress in spiritual life. So the grihasta ashram is there to help uproot these things. It's compared to if you have a thorn stuck in your skin, and in order to remove that thorn, you take another thorn and you remove it. So one thorn to take out the original thorn, right? Grihasta life, family life, is troublesome by nature, and the Bhagavatam talks about it in many cases. But it's a necessary difficulty, right? It's also an austerity. We're talking austerity as the principle of vanaprastha, but grihasta ashram also has its austerities, right? Cooperation with your husband or wife, raising children is very difficult. So you take this voluntary situation to help overcome the attachments and needs that are there that urge you into this situation in the first place. So understanding from that point of view, we can understand that vanaprastha is the goal of grihasta, right? And through the course of one's family life, through the course of his grihasta ashram, performing his duties, one should have that goal in mind, that we're not here to get further and further entangled. Although there is a need for expanding the griha, for getting a home, maybe having a vehicle, expanding the family, having children, and so many things naturally expand from that. It gets a little complex in some cases. In the beginning, we may be expanding in this way, but we should understand that the goal is not to keep expanding endlessly. And in the modern day and age, this is what's happening, is that actually people don't have like an exit strategy. They don't know that we're supposed to at some point wind this up and prepare for the moment of death, which is what sannyas is. Whether you take sannyas formally as a sannyasi like His Holiness Bhakti Marga Swami or Srila Prabhupada, or whether you just simply live according to the principle of sannyas, which Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita. Sannyas means that everything belongs to Krishna, and before we even use some material object or before we engage in some type of activity, it's already for Krishna in the beginning. Whereas renunciation means that I believe I own something and I give that up. That renunciation is an illusion. So sannyas is real renunciation. Sannyas means that before I even begin some kind of endeavor, I already know that it's for Krishna. So we have to get to that platform, and the whole varnashram system is to get to that point. That we understand everything belongs to Krishna, even my own body, even my very self. Everything belongs to Krishna, and everything should be used for His service. As long as we don't have that understanding, then we have these varnas and ashramas which help us to eventually come to that point. So it's progressive, right? It's a perfect system, as Bhakti Marg Maharaj was saying during his class. It's perfect because it's created by God. Chatur Varnyam Maya Shishtam Guna Karma Vibhagashaha. It's created by Krishna himself. So we may find fault with the Asuric Varnashram we see now, the caste system in India, and often when we bring up the subject of Varnashram, especially for those from India, they have like a bad feeling because of maybe some bad experiences that they had under the so-called caste system, But that's not really Varnashram, and it shouldn't be our reference point. Our reference point should be the Shastras, where we learn what is the real course of Varnashram. And according to this verse, Guna Karma Vibhagashaha. Two things determine one's Varna or one's ashram, and that's guna and karma. One's qualities and one's work, right? And Srila Prabhupada nailed this point again and again, because there were many so-called Brahmins in India who criticized Srila Prabhupada when he came to the West and started giving second initiation, Brahmin initiation to his disciples who were from the Western countries. So these Brahmins, caste Brahmins, or Smarta Brahmins, we call them, were claiming that Srila Prabhupada was deviating from the principles of the scriptures because one must be born in a Brahmin family, descending down from a line of Brahmins, and that's the only way by birth that one can have the qualification of a Brahmin, right? But we understand from the words of Krishna, guna, karma, vibhagashaha. Those divisions, vibhag, are according to guna and karma. If one has the title of Brahmin, he may have the thread, but if his karma is that of even less than a Shudra, if he's engaged in illicit activities, like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would say, using the Shalagram Shilas to crack betel nuts and so on. All of these activities are going on under the name of, Brahmins, wearing the thread but doing all abominable things, eating meat even. Then we can understand from karma that this is not a Brahmin. And even if one has the karma, if one's performing some Brahminical activities, but his guna, if his qualities are not Brahminical, then also we cannot say he's really a full-fledged Brahmin. Because as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, you can perform someone else's duties perfectly, but it's better to perform your own duties imperfectly, because this is your dharma. So one can imitate the activities of a Brahmin easily, but we can see by the qualities also, right? And this is also the problem with the Varna Shankar. During Mataji's class the other day on Sri Dharma, she covered this point about Varna Shankar, mixed castes, and the problem with that is the guna and karma gets all mixed up. So one may have the karma of a Brahmin, but the guna of a Shudra, right? He may have the activities of a Brahmin, but then his qualities, he's, lamenting, always complaining, this and that. These sentimental qualities are Shudra in nature. So the Varna Shankar problem with this is that the guna and karma are mixed, and it causes a lot of confusion.
At the same time, it creates the caste system too, like washerman and the barber was a result of the same thing.
The washerman and barber?
Yes, that's what they mentioned in the class too. When the Guru Shankar happens, then Chandals and all, and then people...
Yes. Yeah. Well, it gets very complex. Like according to Manu, if we look at Manu Samhita, it explains when you have the mixes, like you have the 4 original Varnas, and when they start to mix, you have like, if a Shudra woman mixes with a Brahmin man, there's a certain combination that's created. And if a Brahmin man mixes with, or if a Brahmin woman mixes with a Shudra man, another mix is created. And if those two mixes come together, another mix is created. There's like names for all of them.
That's how the caste system is kind of created.
The modern day version, you mean?
Yes, I mean, somewhere it's from the same, that's the source of the caste system, I feel.
Well, the caste system is a degradation of the varnashram system. It's when basically the knowledge started to become less because the Brahmins became corrupted. And we read in the beginning in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam when that happened. It happened with the small Brahmin boy who cursed Parikshit Maharaj when he offended his father. And Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport there that this is where the Brahmins began to become corrupted in Kali Yuga. And from there it just got worse.
That was a very fair thing to at the same time. Somebody is abusing your father unnecessarily.
Mm-hmm.
You getting angry on that. It's a very natural thing.
Well, natural or not, but for a Brahmin it was not the right thing for him to do. And he didn't understand the full situation. But we won't get into that pastime. I was giving an example where our acharyas say that starting point was. But also over the course of Indian history, we see that the Brahmins were targeted. They were targeted by the invaders. They came and slaughtered innumerable Brahmins as well. So when the head is cut off from society, things tend to go a little wild, right? So when the Brahmins are protected, then Varnashram can function very nicely, and that's why Srila Prabhupada emphasized focusing on a Brahminical class of people to re-establish Varnashram. Yeah.
So you said that you talked about karma and guna, and then you said that like someone may have the karma of a Shudra, but their nature, their natural inclination is that of a Brahmana, but we still shouldn't consider them a Brahmana. I think you said that.
Well, it's that there are mixes also, right? That's what Varnashankar means, that there's some mixture. So when we speak of understanding our nature, we have to consider all of the aspects, right? And even you cannot, it's not that you'll completely have the karma of a Brahmin or completely have the karma of a Kshatriya. Because of this Varnashankar principle, because we're not descending, most of us anyway, from pure lineages at this point, then you will have some also impurities there, right? So it's not so cut and dry. It's like it takes a little time to really understand, and especially for children as they grow in the Gurukul, the teacher would observe the inclinations of the children. And at one time, they may be showing one nature, and you kind of, fan the spark and try to encourage them in that way, but at some point it may change also. And it takes time for that nature to become clear because of our polluted environment.
Could you explain a little bit more about what Krishna means by it's better to do, instead of doing someone else's duty perfectly, it's better to do your duty imperfectly?
Yeah. That our dharma is our purifying duty. This is, so we have to understand our like default nature, what is actually our material conditioning, and act according to that. So self-realization means not just understanding the self on the level of the Atma, but also understanding the self on the level of the body. And that's where Varnashram, that's where it applies, is that we use our material conditioning in Krishna's service. This helps us to overcome it. So that's what's meant, is understanding our material nature and acting accordingly. Like men have certain duties, women have certain duties, and if we understand those duties and apply them, then this is how we become purified of our material conditioning also.
I have one follow-up question.
Sure.
So instead of a person pretending to be a brahmachari, and it's better for them to just get married, right? Because their natural inclination is to be with someone else.
Yeah.
Would that be a good application of this?
The idea is that the internal and external should match, right? So if you have the external activities and dress of a brahmachari, but internally your mentality is that of a grihasta, then better to get married. And that's what Chanakya Pandit famously said, that if one doesn't know whether he should travel or not travel, he should not travel. If one doesn't know whether he should eat or not eat, he should not eat. If one doesn't know whether he should get married or not get married, he should get married. Because a brahmachari who's going to remain a Naishtika brahmachari, who's going to stay brahmachari for his whole life and eventually take sannyas or remain a brahmachari and go straight into vanaprastha, he has no doubts. It's clear to him in his heart that he doesn't need this ashram. So grihastha is there for those who need it, right? The medicine is there for those who have a particular disease. And if you don't need it in this life, it means you've gone through it already in your previous life, right? So if you've gone through this and then say you don't attain perfection, you take rebirth, but you've already uprooted those anarthas that lead to the grihastha environment, and then you don't have that need doesn't come out. So the two brahmacharis, when they go to Gurukul, both get the same education, same training. They're both educated in the same principles, the same philosophy, the same lifestyle. One of them attains vigyan, realization of the principles. He understands when the Guru or the Shastra, like Bhagavatam, explains that material happiness is not satisfying. He understands deeply. He has realization of it. And so he has no doubts that material life is full of miseries. He has no doubts that the only happiness in life is in devotional service. So then he doesn't get married. But the other brahmachari, although he attains the same knowledge, he only has gyan, not vigyan. He doesn't realize directly. He has some doubt. The mind thinks that, well, I don't know, maybe if I do it nicely, there might be a little happiness there. And so he needs to learn by experience. The one learns by hearing, the other learns by experience. And both are good, because in the end, they end up in the same place, vanaprastha. So whether you go through grihastha or you don't, doesn't really matter, because we're not this body. We're not brahmacharis, we're not grihasthas. We're not kshatriyas or vaishyas, right? We're eternal soul, servant of Krishna. So the point is to get to that stage of realization. A brahmachari who's going to remain brahmachari has to identify as the soul. He cannot identify as the body. As soon as you identify as a man, a male body, that means I need a woman to complete me. That's the principle of material life. Men and women complete each other. So if you identify as a male, that means that you will be looking for a female. And if you identify as spirit soul, as eternal servant of Krishna, you will be looking for Krishna to complete you. So, however one attains that realization, doesn't matter. There are various medicines given for various conditions or various levels of illness. We all have this material flesh disease. That's what we have to overcome. How one person has to do it and how another does it, it varies. But the principle we have to understand, what we're trying to attain. Yes, Prabhu?
Prabhu, for first, grihasthas, I mean, sense gratification could be a part of the way you call it a disease, but at the same time, they give an opportunity to a lot of souls who want to take birth and get to the birth. So it's just like it opens a door for them. And second, you mentioned about brahmacharis and grihastha, they both go to vanaprastha.
Yes.
So brahmacharis, they don't live a grihastha life.
Yes.
Still, I mean, they are already vanaprastha, and brahmachari is more or less same thing.
Yeah, it's more or less the same. Just
do they have to specifically?
No, it's not like going to be some formal thing that it's just understood at some point when a brahmachari is like, 60, 70 years old, he's probably not going to get married, right? And so that's kind of like he's in the vanaprastha stage already, but without having gone through the grihastha ashram.
Another was Eklavya. He had qualities of kshatriya, and so So was he like a Varnashankar? I mean,
Ekalavya was outcast. He's not in the Varnas. He's from the forest, right? He's part of a tribe. So they also have qualities, but they're mixed. And even if we look at the example of Karna, Karna is a Kshatriya, right, by karma. But because, although he was born of Kunti, so he's born a Kshatriya, but he didn't get the training, he didn't have the environment of a Kshatriya. He was raised by Sutas. And so he didn't develop the qualities of a Kshatriya. That's the problem that the Pandavas had with him, was that by work, he's a Kshatriya. But when it came to the etiquette, he didn't have this.
but the nature is naturally given by Krishna, or we acquire it after coming here, like
There's
the good thing Krishna mentioned.
Yeah, there's two aspects of it. I mean, the nature may be there, but it can be covered because we're not given the proper environment for it to become manifest, right? Like fire may be there in a match, but if you light it in a vacuum, or if you light the match in a damp environment, then the fire cannot burn so brightly, right? It becomes affected by the atmosphere in which it is existing. So for us, it's the same thing. That's why when we come to Krishna consciousness, we come from various backgrounds. Some of us come from very tamasic environments, but our nature, our inherent nature, may be more Brahminical. And you'll see these devotees, when they come to the temple, in the beginning they may look very rough, hair all disheveled and dressed all, and unclean and not much knowledge. But as they get purified in the process of Krishna consciousness, you see that these Brahminical qualities come out. Like Gopi Puranadhana Prabhu, Prabhupada disciple, when he first came to the temple during Prabhupada's time, then devotees explained like he was he looked like a mad person, and he would sleep in the hallway and do all kinds of strange things. But as he engaged in the process and association of devotees, he ended up becoming the top Sanskrit scholar in ISKCON. Right? And others, they come and they progress in the mode of goodness to a certain extent, right? So as we engage in the process of Krishna consciousness, our inherent nature also becomes a little more apparent because we're in a very purifying environment, and it frees us from like the association of the lower modes of nature. So the only difference between the different varnas is that some of them can maintain a lifestyle of a higher standard of goodness, and some of them less, right? So for a Shudra, then they still, as we discussed the other day, they are following a Brahminical lifestyle, but to the extent that they can follow it very nicely, that's what determines really what the Varna is. A Brahmin can live on the platform of the mode of goodness for his whole life. And for example, like, Brahma Prabhu, he can do puja all day long, right? For how many years has he been doing this service?
40 years. Yeah.
40 years? Or if you look at, Jananivas and Pankajangri Prabhus, who, in Mayapur, 50 years or so, steady deity worship, all day, every day. They're Brahmins by nature, that they can maintain that. But some of us, we can come and do a puja once a week, right? The rest of the time, we have to do something else. We cannot maintain that Brahminical activity for our whole life. So that's what determines the nature. If you can do ashram duties, if you can do puja, yagyas, and teaching and studying the shastras and all of these kind of activities full-time, that means you have a Brahminical nature. And if you can do it part-time, and the rest of the time you feel a need to do some other activity, I need to work with my hands, or I need to engage in some business activities, The Vaishyas, they're driven by a need for profit, and they see profit in everything. They see, whenever they look at something, they see dollar signs, some opportunity, So for them, they cannot just sit and do puja. They can do it, as a lifestyle, but not as an occupation. So this, I hope that helps to understand.
Like Shudras are a part of Varna, but they are not a part of Ashrama.
Shudra means an occupation.
Yes.
So the person who has the nature of a Shudra, he's maybe a devotee, and he has his lifestyle, which is different from his occupation. That lifestyle is his ashram, right? That's what's meant. So you have your grihastha ashram, and you go out and you do your occupation. That's two separate things, the varna and the ashram. So that's why it doesn't matter whether one's a Brahmin, Vaishya, Kshatriya, or Shudra. All of them are living a Brahminical lifestyle. That's why in ISKCON, everyone can get second initiation and engage in Brahminical services. Because by ashram, we're all Brahminical. But what you do to maintain yourself, that's what determines your varna. So they're two separate things. So when we say, we take second initiation and then we're all Brahmins, we really mean by ashram, not by varna necessarily. Because the same person, although he has the Brahmin thread, is going out and employed in a company. Technically by karma, he's a Shudra because he's an employee. He's under someone else. And a Brahmin, he's not under anyone. The Brahmin is independent. So that's why in ISKCON we need a deeper understanding of varnashram. And sometimes it's a little shallow. Yeah. Sure.
Yes, Prabhu, I had a question. It's like a follow-up to Abhinav's question. So he asked that if someone has an intention to get married, he should not be in brahmachari ashram. So what if we are in a young age and then we have an intention to get married?
Yeah.
And still we are in a brahmachari ashram. So what should
So
we do?
you can still, when you understand that, you will get married, you can still benefit from the ashram and should to prepare yourself also as a husband, right? Because this is the best training you can have to get into a marriage, actually.
And Prabhupada mentions that as well too, that the brahmachari ashram, it's not just to be a brahmachari and then go to sannyas, it's preparation for grihastha ashram, if that's the natural inclination.
Yeah.
And it should happen around the age of 25 if you're putting timelines. It's like divided in quarters, 25, 50, 75, and then...
Yeah, traditionally it would be starting from, 5 up till 25. And at that time it would be clear to you, or especially to the cool guru, the teacher, it would be clear to them what's the inclination of the disciple. But it should be clear to you at least. It should be clear to you. Like I said, if you have any doubt, it means probably you're preparing to get married. Because that doubt means that there's some interest. And if there's no interest, it means there's no need. So that'll become clear over time. But even if you're in the brahmachari ashram or the brahmachari environment, and you understand that eventually you'll get married, then still you have to maintain strictly the principles of the brahmachari ashram. That means you cannot be in between, right? You should not be in the brahmachari ashram looking at the ladies and so on. It has to be clear, right? Otherwise, you're not really a brahmachari. You're brahmachari in name, and you won't benefit from the ashram environment in that way. So that's why that division is there, right? And traditionally, the brahmachari ashram was separate from society. It was in the forest. It was easier at that time. Now we're all together. So, just needs to be, you need to understand the purpose of each phase of life. What is the principle? And what is the benefit that I'm expected to get from this? And perform those duties. So even if externally you're in the environment of brahmacharya, but you have a desire to get married, So still you need to perform the duties expected in the brahmacharya ashram.
And sorry, I have a follow-up. So,
Okay.
what if someone, like, in that period of time until the age of 25, he's supposed to be a brahmacharya, then he connects to someone and engages in a relationship. So
The fire and butter principle. Yes. At that point, yeah, you need to make a hard decision. Are we going to be serious about this? And if not, then you have to, cut it off. Because you cannot be somewhere floating in between. It's not going to be good for anyone, and it'll be disturbing also for the temple, right?
And what are the consequences if someone does this?
Consequences? Means, it depends. It's kind of a vague, without specifics, but we won't get into specifics here, but I want to go back to the principles, right? The whole point of this talk was to understand the principles, and then the details may vary according to each situation. The principle is that, men and women should be separate until they decide to get married. At the time they decide, it's time for me to get married, then you begin the process of, looking for a spouse. And how you do that, that's up to you, but there are better and worse ways to do it. Better not to leave it up to chance. Better to do it in an organized way, with intelligence, instead of when attachment, waiting for the attachment or the arrows of Cupid, then. So better to be careful in the ashram environment. Men should associate mostly with men, women with women, and when the two come together, it should be strictly on the grounds of service, and should be only as much as is required. But the moment where you start going beyond what's necessary and then entertaining each other, this is where you enter a risky territory where feelings can develop. Then it gets complicated. So you have to act before that happens. Dhyayato vishayan pumsa sangasteshu pajayate. This series of verses, there's 2 verses in the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, from contemplation, then attachment, from attachment, lust, from lust, anger, it spirals. So at the level of contemplation is where you need to act. When you're thinking about, right? When you're considering, that's where you need to pull back, to withdraw. But if you entertain the idea in your mind, then it can go on to attachment. Once you get to attachment, very difficult. And attachment naturally develops into lust. And at that point, it's almost impossible to pull away. And this is a big problem in our temples, actually, that this is often how, men and women come together. It's on this principle of getting a little too close, and then it's like a black hole, you get. And there's not necessarily a problem with that if you do it in a mature way, but something that as a society we need to be aware of and have precautions in place, I think. Because it's going to be an ongoing thing, especially with all of you young men and women. Most of you, maybe not you, most of you will get married. And so you should do it in a very intelligent way. You can follow the mind or the intelligence. And the intelligence will reason according to Shastra and according to seniors. We should seek their guidance, consult the scriptures, and do things in a very intelligent way. And if we're not planning properly, then on the level of the mind, then this can lead to all kinds of complex situations. So, anyway, that was not the main thrust of the discussion here. Point was Vanaprast. But before Vanaprast, that's why we're not quite there yet. Some of us are there. Yes. And Vanaprastha, just to end, we'll conclude on this point. Vanaprastha, what does it look like in modern day and age? You know, does it mean we can go to the forest? Well, where's the forest in Toronto? Can go down to the ravine, I guess. There's many Vanaprasthas there in tents, right? I saw them. So maybe it doesn't exactly mean this, but in ISKCON, Vanaprastha means taking up more of a life of preaching together, or if not together, then apart. Sometimes when it comes to Vanaprastha, there's two options. The husband and wife go together. They stay together in the Vanaprastha ashram, or the husband will go and the wife will stay if she has a desire to help with the children, raising the grandchildren. She will help assist them in a detached way, helping the young family to develop. So sometimes the wife has a desire to carry on in the home environment, and that's fine. Sometimes they go together. If they're both on, if the relationship is very favorable and Krishna conscious, there's no problem. They can work together, and they will do more traveling and preaching. Like we see Vaisheshika Prabhu and his wife, and many nice examples in our society of Vanaprastha couples who are traveling and preaching. Yes? Yes. Traveling and preaching, visiting holy places, spending extended time in the Dham. This is Vanaprastha. It means that you're winding down your griha. You're not expanding anymore your material interests. You're winding it up. And that comes with realization. Realization that only devotional service will give us happiness. There's no happiness to be found in this material world. We were hearing Srila Prabhupada talk about Jadananda, right? The so-called material happiness. And in Bhagavatam, it's called Shruti Sukhat. Shruti Sukhat means that sukha that is heard, Shruti. So we all hear about happiness in this world. We hear great stories of great empires and great heroes, Alexander the Great, and all these great characters in human civilization throughout history. We hear about so many happily ever afters, but we never experience it ourselves. It's just we're hearing about it, and we think, we keep getting inspired by each other talking about it, that yes, there is some happiness here. If we just work a little harder, if we just try in a different way, then we can enjoy in this material world. But it's an illusion. The only happiness is at the lotus feet of Krishna, Sri Guru and Gauranga. So whatever our material situation, Varnashram, if we understand the principles, it helps us to utilize our material life in Krishna's service, to become gradually purified of our material attachments, and to eventually go back home, back to Godhead. So thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Nitai Gaura Premanande.